Hey everybody, here I'm making a Sicilian style pizza in the Breville Pizza Oven, and I'm using Kenji Lopez-Alt's recipe, which I will link in the description. So for this, I'm using a 00 style flour. It's a flour here we can get in Canada. It's not actually 00 that you would get from Italy, but I find it works well for pizza, but I've made this with both bread flour and all-purpose flour, and it's pretty forgiving. Works well with pretty much everything. So to that's about 500 grams of flour, making a double batch here. It's the recipe size, which makes 2-pan pizzas. To that, I'm adding 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. And I will also add a teaspoon of the instant yeast. So I've also made this with traditional yeast where you need to proof it first, works fine. And I've also made it with fresh yeast too. So again, very forgiving on the yeast. And to that, we need to add about, it's a cup and a half of water at room temperature. So, normally you would add warm water to a lot of these recipes, but because it's going to rise all day on the counter, room temperature water works. So it's about a cup and a half, or close to 350 grams of water. And to that, I will add the water, and then I will add the olive oil on top. So I'm using filtered water here, but again, tap water works fine. So I mix the dry ingredients, the water goes in, and then to the water I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and I'm going to swish the bowl around. I'm basically floating the olive oil on top of the water, and I find this works well in order to incorporate the olive oil completely into the dough rather than adding the olive oil to the dry ingredients. So it floats on top of the water, then give it a good swish, and what that does is basically the olive oil sort of breaks up and kind of emulsifies with the water a little bit, and then I'll go in with the spatula and then mix that into the dough. This is a high hydration dough, so it is very wet and sticky. You want to use the spatula, and you'll get most of the dry incorporated doing this, but there'll still be some on the bottom. So then you want to go in with your hands and just give it a mix. It takes probably about a minute with your hands. I've edited the video here, but I probably mixed it for about a minute until you get a shaggy, loose, sticky dough. And that's about it. And so I'm doing this in the morning. Beauty of this dough is it's the same day dough, and you can decide you want pizza that night, do this in the morning, and then let it do its thing. And you can actually even do it quicker if you want to use a stand mixer. You can even shorten the time. But I like doing this particular approach before I go to work in the morning, setting it up and letting it sit at sort of room temperature all day. So I'm going to make the sauce here. For this one, I'm actually doing a from scratch sauce using canned tomatoes, and with basically some, I've got some chili garlic spice from Cormier Spices in Vancouver, some kosher salt, garlic, and oregano. So these are the San Marzano style tomatoes, which I get at Costco. They're not actually San Marzano tomatoes. They're not the DOP, but they are excellent and also great value. And I find they've got a very thick sauce with it as well. So using about half a can, tomatoes and sauce, and to that I will then apply some seasoning. So adding about half a teaspoon of granulated garlic. I'm not measuring any of this, but sort of eyeball it. Put probably 1/4 teaspoon of black ground pepper, about half a teaspoon of dried oregano, and then just to give it a little bit of kick, I'm using a sweet chili spice, which is fairly hot, so adding probably 1/4 teaspoon of that, but you could add some cayenne, you could add some red chili flakes, or nothing, depending on what you want. The sauce itself doesn't end up hot, but it just gives it a little, I don't know, just a little bit of zip. And adding about half a teaspoon of kosher salt here. So to that, I will add some extra virgin olive oil, probably about a teaspoon, just helps emulsify everything, gives it a bit of richness. And I'll use a stick blender for this. And in order to also incorporate the whole tomatoes that are in there. And it will only take a couple of passes. I've got it on low. I don't want to incorporate a lot of air into the sauce. So just really want to break up those tomatoes and emulsify the seasonings and the olive oil. So just up and down a couple times, and that should be enough in order to do this. And then we'll give it a taste and see how it is. For the sauce, I've made this sauce using this pizza with canned pizza sauce. I've made it with using crushed tomatoes. I've made it using passata. Pretty much anything, and again, it's all good. So it really just depends what you've got in your pantry and how much time you have. I find the Rouse jarred pizza sauce is pretty good if you're in a hurry. So I'm just adding a little pinch of sugar here. I don't always add the sugar. Sometimes it needs it, just to again just provide a little bit of sweetness. And then we are good to go on the sauce. And then I'll save the rest of those canned tomatoes for another use. So here we are. It's been about 6 hours. The dough has been on the counter, and it's doubled. You can see it's doubled in size. So it in some of the recipes you'll see when Kenji makes this on some of his videos, he'll actually go in and do this type of fold a couple times during the day. I find I don't need to. I've only just set it up in the morning and then it's good. So here I've got 2 of the carbon steel pans that come with the Breville Pizza Oven. One comes with the oven, and I actually bought a second one because I find it useful to be able to make 2 pizzas, one after the other, which will feed about 4 or 5 people. These are great pans. They're pre-seasoned and they take seasoning very well, super non-stick. So they're really excellent pans, and they're the perfect size. This recipe is about 500 grams of flour, and used to make it in a big round pizza pan in the oven. And it basically splits in 2. You can cut the recipe in half if you only want to make one Breville-sized Sicilian pizza, or just here I'm just eyeballing the dough in half, so I can make 2 of the pan pizzas. And taking that out, just going to give it a little bit of a shape into a disc and put it into the pan. You can see here what I did there in the edit. So the idea is to try to just give it a bit of a head start in order to get it into a disc shape, because we're going to let it rise for another couple hours in the pan, and it's going to expand. And you'll see the one on the left has a bit of a divot in it. That divot carries through all the way to the final pizza. So anything you can do at this stage of the game in order to get a nice round edge is helpful. And I'm just sort of giving it a bit of a stretch. Give it a head start. And then going to cover it in plastic wrap and let it rise. It's a little chilly in my kitchen, so for this rise, for the 2 hours, so the last half hour, I actually put it in the oven with the oven light on, just to give a bit more warmth, because my kitchen is fairly cool. So I'd suggest when you're doing any of this proofing, you do it either in a warm kitchen or maybe in the oven with the light on, just to give it a bit more of a boost, temperature boost. You can see there's that divot that I was talking about in the original dough. It looks like a heart-shaped pizza. So here I really want to get it to the edges of the pan. So I'm going to very gently, I'm going to grease my fingers in some of the olive oil that's there and very gently expand it to the edges as much as I can. You want to do this carefully so you're not squeezing any of the air out. If you can help it. So really just gently trying to get it, coax it to the edges of the pan. The warmer the dough is, like when you did this last rise, the easier this is going to be. And if you can get it to the edges, then you'll get some nice sort of crispy cheese bits, which are sort of one of the best parts of this pizza. So here now we will give it some sauce, for which I'm putting on an apron because invariably I will get the sauce on myself. And this is our sauce that we made a little earlier today. So you can be very generous on the sauce on this pizza. It is it ends up with a fairly thick crust, so it can really support the sauce. Plus, you don't want it to be dry, and it can handle it. So in the end, after eating this pizza, I realized I probably could have even put more sauce. It could have taken more than I'm doing here. Can't really have too much sauce for this one, because the whole thing stays contained as well in the pan, so there's no mess in your oven either. So I'm going right to the edge for this pizza, because again, we have the benefit of it being in a pan, and I really want to get a bit of the sort of crispy bits around the edge of the crust when some of the cheese and sauce goes down the sides. So here I'm using a sliced mozzarella. This is a dry mozzarella with 28% fat, so it's a full fat mozzarella. I like these slices because they are one of the only ways here in Canada where you can get the full fat cheese. Most of the stuff that you buy shredded or in blocks or branded pizza cheese is actually a 18 to 22%, which is not as good. So here you can see I'm breaking these up and doing a single layer of cheese. You can also overlap the slices, which I do sometimes, give you about 50% more cheese, but I was going to be reasonable today and just do a single layer of cheese. And this is Hormel pepperoni, which is, I find, the best one that we can get up here in Canada. We don't have the ones that cup up very well that they have in the US, but this is pretty good stuff. And it's going to my well-used Breville Pizza Oven for 18 minutes at the pan pizza setting. And 18 minutes is longer than you may think you need to do. It'll look done at 15, but you really want to give this thing a bit more time than you think you need, because you want that crust to get that really golden, crispy, fried kind of texture. And fresh out of the oven, we're going to throw a little bit of more oregano on top of here. And I'll give it a dusting of granulated garlic as well, just for a bit more kick. And then top it off with some freshly grated Parmesan cheese, which, again, just for a bit of extra flavor. And we'll pop it out of the pan. Need the spatula really just because of that sort of crispy part that's around the edges, but the pizza itself does not stick given on account of all the oil that is in the pan. You can see it just pretty much came right out. And now I'm going to cut it, and the sound of this was just super crispy, so a real big crunch because that crust is beautifully golden brown. And pizza was delicious. I ate 3/4 of it in one sitting. So it was a win. This pizza is one of my favorites. And again, easy to do and great if you're having people over because it's pretty filling. So you can see here, look at that golden brown crust. Delicious. Thank you very much, everybody.